in terms of the animal has a big influence on what comes out in the back end in terms of the nutrient content, so they vary hugely. Also with slurries and the like, the amount of rainwater, the amount of yard runoff, etc., that gets into the slurry lagoon will clearly dilute the slurry if there's a heck of a lot of it going in. So if there's a lot more liquid, a lot more moisture, a lot more water in the slurry, then it's much less concentrated than if you've got a much drier material where the amount of water in the material is much less, so it's more concentrated. So straight away you've got a different nutrient content depending on the level of dilution of that slurry. So understanding what's in the material is crucial. Digestate, anyone been using digestate around? Well, clearly the feedstock that is used in the anaerobic digestion process will have a very significant impact on the nutrient content of that material. For example, if it's got food waste in it, blood and guts and goodness knows what else, really good sources of organic matter for the digestion process, but also really potent sources of nitrogen and potentially phosphorus. Whereas if you are taking digestate from a farm sourced setup where we're using livestock manures, maybe maize, maybe grass, maybe rye or whatever in that digestate, then the nutrient content of that is going to be a lot lower than the food-based digestate. So understanding where that digestate has come from is really important in terms of being able to understand the nutrient value, and analysing the digestate in particular is a useful thing to do. There are standard figures for the different types of organic material in RB209 and in Manure MBK, and also in the CRAP app, and these other sources of information where you can access that information. And clearly they're really useful as a guide, but if you want to be absolutely, well, have a lot more certainty about the nutrient content and the nutrient value of the material, then getting a sample and getting it analysed is a really important thing to do. So you need to know what's in it, clearly, that's good. Next thing is application rate. Dead simple. Unlikely. For slurries and liquid manures, at least you've got a chance, because we know roughly how much a tanker holds, and usually they stop filling when they're full, and therefore we can count the number of tankers that are going into the field, and therefore how much we've spread over the area of the field. That's relatively straightforward. For solid manures, it's a wee bit more tricky, because obviously the weight and the density of the material will vary depending on the manure type, may even depend on how long the material's been stored. You can imagine something that's coming out of a house, nice and fluffy, lots of straw in it, not particularly consolidated. The density of that material will be a lot less than something that's been stored for 6 to 8 months outside, and therefore it's a lot more settled, and you fill the trailer to the same height, but the weight of the stuff that's been outside for 6 to 12 months will be a hell of a lot more than the fluffy stuff that's come out of the shed. So just understanding how much a trailer holds, and therefore obviously counting the amount of trailers that you're putting in, really important. Also spreading the material evenly, absolutely crucial. So using decent kit for solid manures, these spreaders which have a moving floor, which supply a constant supply of material to beaters at the back, spinning discs at the back, where the material can be spread very evenly, is really good. I mean, side flinging machines can be effective, but they take a lot more management to make sure that you're actually having an even carpet of manure across the field, because clearly if it's spread unevenly, then you're going to have, lumps of very and patches of particularly very green or even purple crop next to patches of very yellow crop, which reflect the poor application, or the not particularly even application of the material. So doing that's very important. And also for slurries, I think a lot of people are using more and more now these band spreaders, the dribble bars, whatever you want to call them, where the liquid material is spread across through a boom, usually 12, possibly 24 metres wide, which can actually fit tramline spacing, so it allows you to spread the material in the spring rather than in the autumn. And again, that means that more of the nutrients that you're supplying from the slurries are going to be available to the crop. And the other thing to think about is actually what's in the soil to start with, because clearly for most manures, certainly for most solid manures, when you're applying a typical application rate of 30-35 tonnes per hectare of FYM, will supply more phosphate and potash, but more phosphate in particular, than a crop takes off. You could easily get 250, 280 kilograms per hectare of phosphate from an FYM application, while a wheat crop will only take off about 60 to 80 kilograms per hectare of phosphate. That means you've got enough phosphate in that muck application to last you 4 or 5 crops. So if you keep going back to the same fields, you keep feeding the soil with a phosphate, all that's going to happen is you're going to build the soil indices up, which, okay, is alright, as long as they don't get to silly levels like index 4 or index 5 or something like that, when there's an increased risk of leaching losses, phosphate leaching and harm to the environment. So effectively moving the manure around the farm or targeting the soils with low P and K indices is an important thing for the more solid manure, because you're putting more P and K on. And I guess some of you might have heard of these farming rules for water now, and they're expecting people to take soil samples and the like to make sure that they can come up with a nutrient management plan. Well, this is the sort of thing they're looking at people doing, is understanding, matching effectively nutrient applications to the soil. Because if it's in the soil to start with, you don't need to put it on with a muck or with a fertiliser, and that's what they're trying to do. Because obviously, if you get to elevated levels of phosphate, then it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time, but also it increases the risk of harm to the environment, and nobody wants that.
And are there people who have a problem then where they've got their indexes are up, they do a management plan, they spread the muck on, and they've got a big slurry lagoon full of slurry or something? Does that ever happen?
Potentially it could do. I mean, obviously it depends on a farm by farm basis what situation they're in, but the opportunity to export the manures in that situation or whatever to farms, next door farms or whatever, is something that they need to think about. I mean, obviously if you're in an MVZ, and those of you lucky enough to be in nitrate vulnerable zones and dealing with manures, probably a long way down the track in sorting this out, because there are, you're restricted in the amount of manure you can apply based on the amount of nitrogen that you've got. And if you don't have enough land to cope with the manure that you're producing, then you have to export that anyway. So to some extent, it's not an awful lot different. If you're dealing with, if you're complying with MVZ rules and all the rest of it at the moment, then by and large you should be okay as long as you move the manures around the farm. I think it's fair to say. But obviously every farm, every situation is different.
That carbon's becoming methane. If we're working with a dairy farmer, and have lays, but also he takes some of the straw. So if he's taking that off, are we losing carbon? We do get farmyard manure as well, but some of it's going into digestate.
I mean, the amount of methane, the amount of carbon that you'd be losing via the methane is relatively small, and it's probably the carbon that will burn off relatively quickly anyway. What we found with the DC Agri project, which was a project funded by RAP and DEFRA, Zero Waste Scotland, that company, and all that lot, which was very, very useful, was looking to see the impact of different organic materials on soil carbon and soil biology. And what we found there was with compost, green compost, where we'd applied green compost over 9 years, the increase in soil organic matter was the same as where we'd applied FYM for 20 years. So twice the amount of organic matter going on with FYM was giving the same increase in organic carbon as half the amount of compost. And the reason for that is we think that the compost is quite recalcitrant because it's been through the composting process, so the organic matter that's remaining is pretty stable stuff and isn't going to break down very quickly. Whereas the FYM, there's a lot of yummy sugars, mucilages, call it what you will, they're easily available carbon. So the bugs work on that and then whoosh, off it goes very, very quickly. So you're probably not, I mean, you're losing a little bit, but to be honest with you, the main benefit for digestate anyway, it's not really a source of organic matter, because generally it will tend to be 4-5% dry matter, which means it's 95% water. The main thing is that it's rocket fuel, or could potentially be rocket fuel in terms of the nitrogen content that you've got in there, because it will be, particularly if it's come from food waste digestate, it could be 6 or 7 kilograms per cubic metre. So 30, and of which 80 to 90% of that could be in the readily available form. So 30 cubes per hectare of something at 7 kilograms per cubic metre gives you 210 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen, 80% of which, so that's giving you a thick end of 170 kilograms per hectare of ammonium N. That's a heck of a lot of nitrogen. So you've got to be really careful about how you apply it. The application rates as well, throttle those down sort of 25 cubes tops in that situation, because it's the nitrogen you're getting, it's not organic matter. If you're wanting to build organic matter up, you're talking bulky organic materials such as straw, but mainly, you know, FYM, compost, biosolids, sewage slush, you know, to the rest of us, but biosolids, those sort of things, stable organic materials, which will build up and repeat applications over several years, or, you know, every other year, and you'll see a benefit in organic matter over an extended period of time. You'll also get the nutrients clearly, and as I said before, phosphorus is one of the main nutrients certainly you get from biosolids and from FYM. And there's a risk, well, not a risk, it's you'll build up the phosphorus levels, and you just need to keep an eye on that to make sure that they don't go bananas and you end up with too much phosphorus in the soil.
What should we be doing with dung? Should we be turning it 2 or 3 times before we spread it?
It's one of those. The only benefit would be potentially if you're composting it, then what you'll end up doing then is breaking it down a little bit more and make it maybe a wee bit easier to spread. If you do turn it, what you do is you release most of the ammonia will go off. And to be honest with you, in FYM, in solid muck systems like that, then there's not an awful lot of available in the FYM to start with. It's mainly a phosphate and potash fertiliser, and any nitrogen you get is a bonus. So it's a soil conditioner with a lot of P, reasonable amount, a lot of K, and a little bit of nitrogen, to be honest with you,
just said
and sulphur.
You raise the soil organic matter by putting compost in. So if this gentleman said if you compost in that, you're turning the muck into compost, and surely that should do a better job of raising the soil organic matter.
It's different. It's different compost. If it's muck, then it hasn't been through the composting process. Green food compost or green compost generally has been through quite a thorough windrowing or in-vessel composting process where it's been heated up to significant amounts and all the rest of it. So you end up with and also the input material into the composting is different to into the green compost process is very different to muck. It would be things like grass cuttings, it would be garden waste, etc., which has a different carbon to nitrogen ratio than the muck would have. Okay. Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. That's the thing. I mean,
The other thing is, talking about all without organic as well, in my mind, it costs fuel.
yeah.
And if we're also using plenty of digesting, that gets that helps break down the straw, which eventually
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, just to make the point that the digestate does vary significantly depending on the source. I said that earlier, and that's a very important point. And if the supply and digestate with an analysis, then I think that's a very important thing for the users to have. And also the other thing to think about is the quality of the material that you're spreading. Particularly there's quality standards such as PAS 100 for compost and PAS 110 for digestate. And I recommend strongly that you use these quality products to make sure that the material that you're putting onto land is of best quality, because there have been issues with certain cases where we end up with a bit too much plastic or a bit too much glass and things in it, and that's not what we want. We want quality gear going to land, and I think you'd endorse that, wouldn't you?
I can say one more thing. We are quite crammed in here this afternoon. We've got another session.
No,
We're overrunning. Sorry about that.
Not at all.
Take one more and then they will close the to join us and we can keep talking and stuff. So yeah.
Enzymes for soy stores, you use on those for your food,
I haven't worked with enzymes, so I'm not really in a position to comment. Really, as I say, I mean the main benefit of the material is the fact that it's got, as I see it, it's a source of nutrients, it's a source of organic matter. There's a heck of a lot of organic material in there. There's an awful lot of biological activity going on in the slurry to start with, I don't know whether using enzymes or anything like that makes that better or worse. I'll be honest with you.
Do you use them?
Right, no. There's a lot of people out there selling.
Oh, loads, yeah.
Thank you so much, John. I'm really sorry that we haven't got so much time. But we can come back again afterwards as well. Yeah, if people want to stay in here, and yeah, it's all about all talking to each other as well. I would like now to welcome Rob Havard, who's going to talk to us a bit about planned holistic grazing. Come and take a seat. Come and make yourself at home. Have you had a drink? Then I'll get you a drink. Yeah. Thanks, John. Do stay, everyone. You're very welcome.
Because we also use the organic research centre. So certainly by all means we're very happy to put it out there. But also they would know very specific farmers.
Oh yeah, so you alright next time? Yeah, good to see you. I'm sure you will be. Yeah, you got to. Yeah. You know that I'll meet in Cambridge. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. Have a good trip back.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing.
Work on it.
The ammonia in. I mean, the thing is, once you spread it, you've got to try and keep the ammonia as well. So you have to on the ground.
If you,
I'll just get you to quick intro and then we'll just
Yeah, I mean,
That's right.
Thank you very much, John. Appreciate that. Hello everyone, anyone that just joined us, welcome to Agrology 10. Thanks to John Williams from ADAS for that, was fantastic. I'm sure we've still all got lots of burning questions, so we'll find you afterwards. And welcome Rob. So Rob is farming over in Worcestershire using a diverse system with holistic grazing, so I'll let him tell you all about it, and then you can ask him all the questions.
Okay, so a quick intro to what I do. We're 50 acres at home. I don't know how many people were in the talk earlier on, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. But lost most of the family farm for various reasons, and spent a lot of time doing lots of things wrong and trying to work out how to farm, to get the farm going again. And about 5 or 6 years ago, through the Pasture Fed Livestock Association, sort of stumbled across holistic plant grazing. Within a month, we were doing sort of holistic grazing at home, and in that time, we've gone from our 50 acres at home to just over 400, and more offers of land coming in all the time, and opportunities coming up. And I think it's been such a good thing for me, and actually for my family relationship with my father, who's very much a straight down the line commercial, pilot high, all of that sort of stuff, plenty of nitrogen, nice big cows, all that sort of stuff. So, but actually for him to see the condition on the cattle and see the easy calving and see the change in the farm finances, it's been great. I will also say that I have a town job, so I work full time as well, because moving cattle doesn't take too long, and that's because I'm growing the business. I'm growing from a small farm to try to get to a bigger farm that provides me with a living. I don't want to carry too much debt, and so I need to. Cows are expensive. I didn't inherit a big farm with all the cattle paid for, so I've got to pay for it. So I just balance my hours and the family and the farm, and trying to get the odd thing like this. So, is that all right?
Yeah. One question I have is about breed selection. So what crop are you running, and is it important to find breeds that will manage in your system?
I think most of our native British breeds, we're lucky, they're used all over the world in the grass-fed systems. We've got them here. In terms of performance, I really don't think there's a massive difference. There's more variation than there is outside of it. I chose Angus mainly because I didn't want to dehorn anything. I wanted easy care, easy carving, and there's some Angus that are more easy carving than others, but we're obviously choosing the maternal genetics. And also because of the Angus premium. So if you know, I'm looking to maximise my income per cow, and so we're selling pedigree breeding animals, and there's a premium for Angus. So you know, dairy farmers want an Angus bull. They just want a live calf with Angus on the passport, so they're not actually that bothered about growth rates or anything like that. And so I was just looking at 35 pence a kilo. It was a good decision because it just puts a bottom in where you are. You've got to get every advantage you can, and that's why I chose. I think if you're going organic or if you're retailing meat yourself, the breed choice becomes less important. But I've done the retail meat business, and I'd rather stay married. So.
And so the pastor fed that kind of diversity story, is that of interest to your buyers, you know, or is it going into the same market?
When we were selling meat, it was really interesting. Do you know what? They're really people. You'd sell the story about, because we do loads of wildflowers, wildflower meadows, using the native. There's about 5%, well 95% of all of our native pastures have been destroyed in this country. So we're talking about some of the meadows that we use the hay from. We've got 200 species of wildflower that it's just incredible, and they're productive. And I'd sell that story, but actually most of the customers for the meat were actually, they bought them because of you. Like they're buying you as a story, as a family, as a trust. They shake your hand when they buy. They know where it's coming. They can see the cattle. And also to remember, you can sell the environmental side, but essentially, you know, if they're buying a steak or if they're buying a bull off you, they're buying meat. They're buying a steak. So they want to taste good, you know, and they want the ethical side, yes. But you know, I think, and maybe the ethical side's growing more than when I was doing that. But I think it's you know, they're buying into you when they do that, and I think it's the same with pedigree stock. You know, that they do want to see the system. The cattle have got to perform. The best way for me to stay in business is for me to provide value to my customers, so that my cattle perform for them long term.
How often are you moving? Are you not grazing or
Well, it varies, and rest periods, people always ask what's your rest period, and I just say it varies. But if I had to summarise sort of golden rules, and this is quite difficult doing this in front of one of my farming heroes who's sat over there, who's come a long way, but it's what I try and do is I try and make sure that I don't graze grass until it hits boot stage, once it's coming out of either a rest period or you know, so I want to see some stalks. Obviously, sometimes if you're coming later in the year, it's not going to be coming back into seed, but you need to have enough cover that it's recovered from its grazing. You're not to be seeing evidence of grazing on the grass plants, and you want good covers. And usually, I'm coming back in the winter to about 4,500 kilos of dry matter per hectare. I'll go in and then I'll go through the winter grazing first. So I've got my stockpile grass, and I'll have bales set out through that, and I'll move the electric fence through the stockpile grass. In the winter, I'm moving every 2 days. When I've had it really awfully wet, I've moved twice a day. I just play it by ear. I'll use a back fence more. I try and use a back fence if I can, but also, you know, if it gets wet, you can spread them out a bit. It can help a bit. What I tend to do is for the first month, so if my dormant season grazing starts in December the 1st, I'll leave a fair bit. So I'll keep skimming across the top, which is what I do throughout the summer to prepare my stockpile, which is, some people, it's not what the mob grazers particularly say, but I find it works for me. And for the first month, I'll leave 4 to 6 inches of residue when I'm grazing through that. And then from January, I'm going to do quite a severe graze and utilise as much as I can. And the reason for that is when I come to the end of that dormant season rotation in the spring, that month of grass that I left a high residual is just going to fly as soon as we hit February. Because I've got so much cover on the ground, my grass keeps growing right into January, and we get okay, and it hardly stops. To be honest, we in this country, we complain so much about our climate, and we've got about the best climate to any kind of farming in the world, and we've just got to remember that our winters are not -40. We don't have summers of 40 degrees centigrade for long periods. Our cattle are happy in the summer and they're not stressed by the heat. So we, when we graze through, and then when we come into sort of mid-April, I'm coming into 3,500–4,000 kilos of dry matter. You've got to let the plant recover. So as long as it's recovered to about that dry matter level, then I'm happy as putting stalls back into the roots. I'll then skim graze from that point on, and quite quickly it'll get ahead of me. But as it gets ahead of me and I'm grazing more stalks, the cow pats firm up, and they start working more efficiently, and we're going through calving starting from 1st of May. And then through the summer, which mob grazing would be very high density, I tend not to do that. Our pastures wouldn't match the forage of a ryegrass clover lay that a lot of people would use in a modern intensive system. But actually, if you let them take the best, then as they graze across the top, the studies have been done on this, that they've had holes in the sides of a cow where they're actually going to see what they're grazing. If you take a whole forage sample on the whole forage, it's going to come out not that good. But if you look what they're eating, it comes back really good, because cows are they're best at deciding what they need to eat. Now you've got to be careful if you're skim grazing that they are being selective, so they can move your species diversity or species composition slightly as you go through the year. But I find that tends towards some of the deeper rooting grasses with that system. The legumes really like it as well. So your red clovers, your bird's foot trefoils, which is a nice combination, work really well. And then bird's foot trefoil's got the tannins in that prevent the bloat, and that could be quite important if you've got a lot of clover. And then I find if you do severe graze in the winter, then you're doing that equal treatment to every plant in the winter, and everything gets a chance, then that balances and prevents you moving your species composition too far. But I'm not saying I've got it right, but I'm just saying what works for me at the moment.
Have you done any sort of holistic management? Holistic plan grazing is just a part of holistic management.
Yeah.
So have you done that, or have you sort of concentrated on the holistic grazing?
I think everyone concentrates on the holistic grazing, mainly because we don't have time to spend 2 weeks with the entire family doing all the financial planning in one shot, and it would be valuable to do that. I do as much of that as I can. It's really some of the really good things within holistic, making sure you've got anyone with veto power completely on board with everything you're doing, and keeping the communication spot on with everyone. That's really important, because it's so easy for mixed messages. Like I rent land, so my landowners have to be happy, or I don't have a business. So forcing yourself to focus on that's really important. I do like some of the decision tests. I think when you've used it for quite a long time, and I've done quite a bit of few trainings, and I'm probably going to train as a certified educator. But the main reason I do it, because I don't want to be a consultant. I'm far more interested in spending time with the cows. But it just helps me, because it cements it in my head. And then when I'm making decisions, it's about thinking everything in the whole, and it's something within farming that we are very good at, is say focusing on growth rates. And then we'd be really pleased that we're top of the industry for growth rates, but unfortunately none of our cows can stand up, and they got huge udders and whatever else. So you've got to look at everything, and it's not just the other thing. The way I'd say it's worked well is made me communicate better with my father. I breed a Hereford breeder before, so he's absolutely loving the pedigree side now, and that's been great to work with him in that vein again. But the family side, making sure that you've got the balance with the family. You've got to have time for holidays. You've got to have the family time for the kids. I'm not going to get that again. So I do use it, but I think it's when you've used it, when you do a lot of the training, it starts just slipping in. If you have to follow everything that's in that book all the time, it doesn't. It's too much. Yeah.
When you're going on to, you've got rent to plan, so that will the flight loss
Yeah.
What do you look at when you're going on to reviewing these things? Like what sort of setup and stuff doing?
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah. But if you've got pasture there, then you're going to know what's there. I'm lucky with my ecology background. I know what everything is, so I know what's missing, species composition, and I'll add that in. I'll often I buy hay from sites so I know what the species composition is, and I feed that hay, and then the species from it. And it takes time. But we took on 180 acres just over 12 months ago, and we put 80 acres of that down to wildflower meadows. It was arable, the rest was pasture. I probably won't be able to winter on that arable for 3, 4, 5 years, but we'll see. But through the stewardship scheme, we've put in 4 kilometres of fencing, we've put in 1.5 kilometres of water pipe, and then I've got my movable. So that's not a cost to me really, and the landowner loves that. They're getting the farm fenced. But then I'll have a movable handling system, and then I'll have and then my electric fences and mobile water systems. So a lot of the main equipment that I use is I can take it if I lost that lease or whatever. I can take it somewhere else along with the cattle, along with the handling system. So it's not wasted capital. Okay. Any more? Yeah, a little bit. It depends where I am. I mean, I've got at Crewe, we've got the one farm. There's a National Trust tenant there with them, and then there's a National Trust tenant on the other side of the river. Andrew, who's a brilliant farmer, lovely guy. He's the local NFU chairman as well, and it's just quite funny when his cows are swimming over the river to get to my grass. And so I pull his leg, but he's great. But there are other on the new farm we've taken on. There, it just happens to be an area that, because of the estate that all the tenants are on there, everyone massively about productivity, production. Never mind about profit, but you've got to be producing. Spinning loads of nitrogen. 3 cuts of silage has to be, and they're all going out of business. But, and they're like, they see me there, my bales spread across the field in the winter, and they just think I'm nuts. But they do. To be fair, though, I think once they realise that you can get through, and I catch them sometimes walking on the footpaths across the farm, but they can see that the pasture's not damaged, because that's what they always think, the wintering is going to damage it, and I think they must be able to see the cost savings, I guess. I usually work around the footpaths, and something I'm working on at the moment on the new place is, at the moment I'm just temporary fencing the footpaths out, so the cattle and people don't have to mix other than, not too far. But I'd look at stuff like that as opportunities. So I've got some footpaths that go right across this farm in 3 different directions. So I'm not a fan of the extreme silver pasture agroforestry stuff, because I just don't think it stacks up. But I definitely believe in tree systems. So I was thinking, well, with the footpaths, what if we put green lanes in with all the right tree species, because they're already next to hedges. So just create green lanes across. So you're fencing the people in, and with the best will in the world, we put permissive paths and stuff around the place, and it's it just people abuse it, unfortunately. So we've provided extra access, but I think we can fence the cattle away, give the cattle more shade, give them a browsing opportunity, improves the habitat and the environment as well. So use it as an opportunity for your planning.
The conference at 2 o'clock with Red Judy is about to start
Yeah.
there, so a lot of you are probably keen to get over there.
Me too.
Yeah. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks so much, Rob. Really appreciate that. Yeah, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. And do sign up to the newsletter because you'll be fun to get updates on lots of things.